Hello and welcome to the Leadership Lab, the podcast where we dissect life science success stories. I'm your host, Morris, and I'm thrilled to bring you conversations with industry visionaries in the life science space who will discuss their successes, failures, challenges, and also the leaders who inspired them. So welcome to the Leadership Lab. I'm your host, Morris, and I'm joined today by Marc Bauer. Marc is the head of legal for EMEA at Argenics, the largest biotech by market cap in Europe. I mean, we were just defining it before we got started, but I think fair to say that one of the leaders. So welcome. Really great pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So Marc, we've known each other for quite a while, and it's always interesting for me because I do have people on here that I've known for quite a while, but I don't actually know that much about them. And when I'm talking to them, I really find out, kind of where they came from and how they kind of grew up into the business and what they do today and their day-to-day and philosophies on leadership and all of that. So I'm really excited to kind of get into that with you today. We usually like to start with kind of where you're from, where you grew up, where you're born.
Yeah. Born and raised in Germany.
Okay.
I grew up in a small little town near to Cologne, Düsseldorf, that area. Had a very good time there. I moved later on to for my studies to another town more mid-Germany. I did my studies there, a town called Münster. And then I went for my first job to Munich, worked in one of the bigger firms there. So traveled a little bit around Germany.
Okay.
But all my roots are in Germany, in the middle of Germany, in the coal mine area, so to say.
Okay. And what was your football team?
Don't remind me of my football team.
Yeah,
That's a very painful exercise right now, but it's FC Schalke.
Yeah, I wrote it down because I couldn't remember. I'm not a football guy, but I had it right.
Lucky
FC Schalke, because you used to have it in your office. And this is how ignorant I am.
Yes.
I came in, I'm like, oh, did you play for them? Because I don't know much about football, but you kind of laughed and said, no, definitely not.
I'm a proud member of the club and going through a painful exercise of going through the second league, trying to come up back to the first league. So
okay, yeah. Well, I mean, look, my team hasn't won a championship since 1967. So
we can beat that. 90, 30 something in the 1930s.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I think we can beat that.
But my team is the richest team in the entire league. And they haven't won since 1967.
That I cannot.
Right? So this is our year. Okay. What were you like as a kid?
Actually, I loved to do sports. I played tennis quite a bit. I was out with friends. I would say an average kid, doing normal stuff that you would do that annoys your parents, like coming home dirty, playing tennis too long than what was agreed upon in terms of time. Like a normal kid, enjoying myself, having an 8-year-old brother. He is 8 years older than myself. We were pretty much doing our own stuff. I was very much rooted into sport. He was more rooted into music and computer. Yeah, and had a good childhood there.
Okay.
Never thinking of living in Switzerland one day.
Me neither. Yet here we are in this room
Exactly.
today. What about school? Were you a good student, would you say?
I would say I was an average student. I remember, and now fast forward to my legal exams. At the legal exam, the oral legal exam, one of the judges actually, who was the examiner, looked at my grades and said, "You're quite a latecomer, aren't you?" So that maybe tells you something about school and uni.
Then how, you're talking about the legal exam, how did you end up coming to that as the subject to study?
Well, actually, there were two things when I remember back to that time. So I was 16 and I had to do apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. The school mandated that. And a good friend of my parents had a law firm, a local law firm. Mm-hmm. And they said, why don't you just go there and check it out? And I did that for a few weeks. And I was kind of fascinated by what the guy did, helping people, doing stuff that I found interesting, despite the fact that I had to stamp the envelopes. But I was looking what the guy was doing. And in parallel to that, a very famous movie came out in cinema, which was The Firm.
Ooh, John Grisham.
Exactly,
I
the
read the
Grisham
book.
firm.
Yeah, I
So
read
I
the
was
book once.
working in that little firm. I was reading the book, watching the movie, and I thought that's exactly what I want to do. Maybe not exactly ending up like the guy in the
No,
movie.
he had some problems, if I
He
remember
had
right.
some
Yeah,
problems.
because they were all evil lawyers in the end, I think.
Yes, obviously, I didn't want to pursue that path. And these were actually really two things that I can tell you were driving me to say, well, I really want to become a lawyer. And from that day onwards, not that my grades improved, but I had this kind of thinking, maybe it's the best thing for me to do.
So it
And my
wasn't.
mom supported me in that. She said, well, we are an engineering family, a lot of engineers in the family.
Yeah.
I cannot even turn something into the wall without hurting myself. And she said, look, you can talk and you can think about things in a different way. Why don't you try it out?
And I don't know, Pelican Brief and I don't know, the other Grisham books. Did you also continue reading?
Yes, I'm a very passionate reader. I'm still reading the Grisham books. In my view, yes.
He still writes?
He still writes. I have one at home. I forgot the title. It's still something I need to read. I think The Firm was the book that I would always refer to, or The Jury, or something around the older books.
Yeah.
But I really love to read those books. Yes,
I was
absolutely
very into them as well. I mean, I read a lot of them. Movies came out. I watched the movies. I mean,
but it didn't trigger you to become a lawyer.
No. But now I always tell my son he should be a lawyer because he's argumentation. He argues about everything, and he's always got a point where he calls me out. I'm like, damn it, you're just like a lawyer. No, it didn't trigger that for me.
Right.
I don't know. Science was always a thing that I really, really enjoyed. But look, in the end, turns out we just talk for work.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I do.
Yeah.
And pretty much what you do. Or I'm really interested to actually find out more about what you do.
Yeah.
But then so you decided, okay, I'm going to go to Münster. I'm going to study.
Mm-hmm.
You graduate, and then you go to Howell, right? Was it?
I went to Hogan Lovells.
Hogan Lovells, yeah. What are they like? What are they known for? I'm not I don't know all the law firms. I don't know.
So basically, this was more of a coincidence than anything else. So basically, during the studies, you have a university part and you have a practical part where you go to courts and you go to law firms and you do certain stages, so to say, in your education.
Because you also went to Dubai at one point as
well. Yes, I went to
before
Dubai.
It was cool.
No, after I graduated, so you have two exams to do in Germany. The first is the university exam. And after that, I decided, at that point in time, it was 2002, I thought like, where should I go where nobody else is going? And it's a pretty hidden, gem, so to say. And I decided for Dubai. And I just wrote emails to people there and said, look, I'm a graduated student. I would love to get some experience. And one of the local law firms actually accepted me. And the good thing was, which I didn't do upfront as a research, Dubai implemented the German commercial code as a basis. So what I learned at uni, I was able to actually apply during my traineeship there. That was really cool. So I stayed there for a few months, friends visiting me. I had a good time there. Still friend with the guy who owns the law firm. It's a local one. And then I continued my practical part of the studies with stages at the courts, the public prosecutor, the law firms.
Okay. I want to come back to something. In your process to make that decision to go to Dubai, you wanted to go kind of off the beaten track, something that you've got a hidden gem. What was it about Dubai that attracted you?
So it was potentially a place that I wasn't familiar with. So curious about the unknown. It was a place in 2002 where there was one major skyscraper. Yeah. The Burj Al Arab Hotel, the famous one, was just finished. And I was thinking, maybe you try the unknown and put yourself into a situation which is not the most comfortable one. It's a new country, new culture. You need to navigate by yourself. There is nobody around you that can actually help you in the beginning to set this all up. And that was quite exciting to me, to give myself a little bit of a challenge.
Okay. And then how you went about it, now we all have easy apply on LinkedIn, right? But you...
Not at that time.
Well, no, exactly. So you talked about how you just started writing to people.
Yeah.
So you made this little...
Yeah.
So obviously computers were a thing.
Yeah.
In 2002. But But how did you, like, what was the process there? Because most people today, I'll be really honest, just approaching bosses of companies, it doesn't happen that often. So what was your train of thought? How did you identify them? How did you know the right people? What did you write to them to make them ultimately accept you?
So basically, I did not have a fully fledged out strategy. So what I did is I was working at that time at the university as a side job. And I was sitting in front of the university computer and said, okay, Dubai it is. And then I researched the firms that are there. And I found some more, you could say, international firms. And I found some local firms. And I didn't really assess whether I would have a chance with the bigger or the smaller ones. I basically wrote all of them a little bit of a similar story saying, look, I'm a German student. I'm super curious to get to know your culture, your legal system, working in a different environment. Would you offer a traineeship? And I sent that email out to, I don't know, I think it was 20 something law firms. Some of them didn't even bother to respond to me. Some responded, said, thank you, we're not offering this. And the guy came back and said, of course, I would be more than happy to have you.
And did you say
I was shocked.
Like, you don't have to pay me, or was it like...
I didn't say any of these things.
Okay.
He came back and said, of course. And I was shocked because I didn't expect that. So then the plan became reality. And I wrote back and said, wow, that's amazing. How can we set this up? And he said, look, I will pay for your apartment. I give you a little monthly salary. And I give you a car if you like to have one, because I have plenty of cars at home.
Kind of traineeship business.
Yeah, that was he was very passionate about supporting young people. And that was clear to me from the very beginning when I arrived there.
Was he a local guy?
He was a local guy.
Okay.
Yes. So he is and was a local guy. He has a local law firm. He is, I would say, in the broader circle of the ruling family. I didn't know that all when I applied. But he was just really keen to support young people that wanted to do something that was out of the ordinary. And he really liked that approach. He said, look, here's a little office. Here are some contracts. Can you start to look at them and tell me what you think? And it was a wonderful experience that still inspires me when thinking about people going into this discipline and maybe sometimes doing something that is uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, very cool. So you were there for
4 months.
4 months.
Yes.
Okay. Then you come back?
Did my practical part of the education, went to courts, went to law firms, public prosecutor, some authorities where you need to work with your within the legal part of the authority. And then I did my second exam. And after that, you are graduated lawyer. You can become a judge or you can become a lawyer. At that point in time, I was very much focused on, it's funny to say these days, I did a PhD on artificial intelligence at that point. So 20...
You did?
I did. So my PhD is on artificial intelligence and whether it can legally contract under German law, or whether it's the nature is of a legal nature. Okay. So I was a little bit maybe ahead of...
no kidding.
So it was called Electronic Agents. You can find it also in the Zurich Library. By coincidence, I found out. And it was about assessing whether a system that goes out on the internet and is dealing with someone to make a sale, whether that system in itself can be legally qualified as a legal individual. Or whether there's any legal considerations in terms of liability. Is the guy who's owning this liable for this? So I know it's 20 years ago. The other day, the professor where I wrote this came back to me and said, we are looking at your PhD just purely from a historical perspective and whether the ideas that you had would still survive. I don't think many survived, but yeah.
Well, to be thinking about it early.
So I came from that area. And never thought about biotech at that point in time.
Okay, but that was one question I had, is that you don't have to do a PhD to be a lawyer.
No.
So why did you do it?
So if you want to be a lawyer, you don't need a PhD. But if you want to go into one of the bigger international firms where you have a bigger, I would say, breadth of experience that you can gain, like commercial law, and you don't want to go into a local law firm doing like divorce law or something. I wanted to go into the commercial side. That was clear to me.
Okay.
Looking at the firm book. those big law firms that at that point in time in 2005, they required you to have two things, a PhD and the graduation needed to have a certain grade.
Really? And that was the minimum to qualify?
You needed a minimum grade and you needed the PhD and or a Master's of Law. So I did the PhD also to fulfill that, but I was also interested in that topic in full transparency.
Okay.
And
so you didn't ever want to be a divorce lawyer? Or,
no, I didn't want to do family law or something. Criminal,
nothing.
No, I really had fun doing the commercial side, commercial contracting, helping the business to prosper, looking at these kind of aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought it was really important, and then I learned the hard way that lawyers are important.
Yes.
Well, I mean, like I'm a sales guy, so it's just okay. Let's figure out a way to get it done. We'll worry about that later. Yeah, but it has its issues. I mean, you need to be careful about compliance and obviously ensuring that your contracts are very tight. And that's something that I always thought, people are good. They'll understand the nature of this. They know the meaning behind it. And it's really interesting how you can get turned in circles pretty quickly. And all of a sudden you find yourself out in the cold, let's say. So
yes. Which is also an interesting experience, isn't it?
Yeah, we got a lot of lawyers now. Okay, good. Hogan Lovells. So that's an international company?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's one of the bigger law firms that have offices across the globe, US, Europe, Asia, and beyond. And actually, when you graduate, when you do your second exam and you graduate, and you think you want to go into one of these firms, there's normally like recruitment fairs where you can go, the firms present themselves. And I got in contact with a guy at Hogan so I have to go a little bit back. During my practical education, I needed to do a stage at a law firm. So at that point, I went to Freshfields, also one of the big law firms, commercially driven. And I was thinking doing digital, right? Because I came from the PhD background.
Cool.
And the very first day I came in there, they said, I have good news for you and bad news for you. I said, let's start with the bad. They said, well, the guy who was supposed to take you on the digital side is no longer with us. So, okay, what's the good news? Well, we have someone in the life science team who is really keen to get you on, not because of me personally, but he needed somebody to support him. So I said, well, again, the unknown, let's give it a chance, right? You never know what you're encountering. And that was my start of my life science journey. Then fast forward, I did the exam and I got in contact with Hogan. And Hogan Lovells was recruiting for a life science lawyer in Munich. And I had to fulfill two conditions. It was the PhD in a certain grade. Luckily, I could tick both, and that's how I started my career there.
Okay. I think a lot of people would say, well, no, I've just spent all this time on my PhD, digital, AI, no, this is my path. That's what I've been focused on. And just through complete happenstance, somebody left the company and your whole career path changed.
Yeah.
Would you say it's important to always roll with the punches, or do you think there's some points where you have to say, no, this is where I'm strong and this is what I'm really passionate about, so I'm going to stick to that and now I'm going to go somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say one of the things that, if I look back at my career, always followed me was like openness for opportunities, and not just being completely, I would say, agnostic to what I want, but being open to whether these things could also fit in where I see myself having fun and contributing value. And at that point in time, I was so much focused on getting the experience in a big firm, and that was my driver.
Okay.
Freshfields, big experience. I said, give it a try. What I very quickly figured out is that this is a super interesting area to work in. And I'm still fascinated by AI. These days, I could even combine it, right? But I was then after I did my exam thinking, should I continue the digital side of the house or should I continue the life science? And I really had more, I would say, energy, positive energy coming out of the life science part. So that's why I followed that.
Why? Why was that interesting?
Yeah, so there's a few things. What I quickly learned when I started working at Freshfields in this area is it is a highly regulated industry, as we all know.
Yes.
And that has an immediate impact on how you operate as a function within the company, because you're pretty much involved in every business aspect of the company. Not only as a lawyer, but also as a business partner, because of the high regulations. People will pull you in and ask you sometimes for your legal assessment, but also sometimes for your business judgment. And in the early days, obviously, when you are a junior lawyer or still in your part of becoming a lawyer, it's more the technical side that you learn. But because you are involved in everything of the company, you are learning how life science works and how companies operate, from bench to patient, so to say, from research to commercialization to patent to engagement with physicians. So you see the full spectrum, and it was fascinating to me.
So you were at Hogan Lovells. You stayed how long?
6 years.
6 years. And that was mostly serving pharmaceutical biotech clients? Like Munich is not necessarily a hotspot. I mean, there's a few companies.
Yes, so we had a few. When it came to, you would say, functional expertise, there were two main hubs in Hogan in Europe. That was London and Munich. There was a very famous partner in Munich, well recognized also in the industry. That was my kind of mentor in the beginning. So basically, we worked across all companies. We had big pharma that we were supporting the legal department as an additional resource. We had small biotechs that needed us as an external legal department to help them building up the structure. We had medical devices. And we had also investors. That was more the corporate side, where we helped the investors to invest into life science companies. There, we were kind of an annex to the corporate team that was driving this, and we brought the life science expertise.
Okay. And ultimately, you can make a pretty great career on the side of working in law firms. And I mean, as we all know, quite a bit of money. I mean, it's very lucrative as well. But you didn't stay. So why did you leave? So
there were a few reasons for that. So it was 2010, exactly. And I was approached by one of your colleagues at that point in time in Germany who said, well, there is this biotech company in Switzerland that is looking for an in-house lawyer that is basically doing what you're doing externally now, but within the company. So this was looking after the commercial operations in certain countries, but helping from launching a product into the very end of the life cycle of the product. And I was not really thinking about going in-house, but I had one big advantage. During my 6 years at Hogan, I was twice seconded into a legal department of a pharmaceutical company. So I was able to understand how they work and how close they are to the business. Whereas me, as a lawyer, I'm a little bit more distant, right? Because I have maybe the legal department in between me and the commercial client, but I'm always the outsider. And then I was starting thinking, do you like to stay for the long term on the outside and helping in very different client environments? Or do you want to follow one client from growing from a mid-sized biotech to a big one and finding your career path there? It wasn't an easy decision because I wasn't thinking about leaving.
Yeah.
But I finally decided to make that call and join, and that was Amgen at that time in 2010.
Well, that's where we met.
That's where we met, exactly.
Before we get to Amgen, I want to actually focus on, because a lot of people face the same kind of decision. You can be a law firm, or you can be at a McKinsey, or like a company like ours, an agency that supports. So you've got a lot of people who are on the outside. And one of the things because I speak to a lot of people who are thinking about making that move from whatever function they're in as a consultant or external firm into an in-house position. And one of the things I get is that, like very often is, oh, well, we never get to stick around to see the final results. We come in, we give advice, and then we're gone to the next client. But they also tell me that, winning the clients, or, they have much more highs and lows in their external job than when they come inside. It's sort of like, okay, it never ends. It's sort of like, okay, you have one thing and then you go on to the next thing, and it's a much more kind of flat experience. I don't know. Would you say that that's true for people considering something like that?
I think you have a good point, Maurice, when you think about the risk when you are operating in-house. It could very well be that you are in a defined space and you will just go on every day. You get things in, you work on the things get out, and you day in, day out, it's almost, I wouldn't say like Groundhog Day, but it's a little bit like...
But that's what I'm getting at a little bit. Yeah.
But this is also, and maybe we talk about this later, is about career development and how you understand the opportunities within a company, not versus, but let's say versus against the opportunities in a law firm, right? And law firms have changed since I left. But at that point in time, when I joined the firm, and I had to make the decision in 2010, the firms were pretty much up or out, right? So you grow as an associate, senior associate, and then you are potentially on a partner track, or you stay in a counsel role. But you always, like, there's limited room to grow. For example, if you wanted to become more savvy on the business side of the house, the law firm doesn't allow you to do that. Right?
Okay.
Because you are in a legal discipline. Now moving over to the in-house side, I agree with you. You can perfectly sit in your role and do that forever. But I don't think this is how a legal team works these days. I think first of all, it's the legal function within a company is not a legal function. It should be, in my view, a business partner, which is not just a word, it's also a philosophy that comes with this. And the philosophy is that you really embed yourself in the business by understanding the business, maybe getting even exposure by taking a role in the business and coming back into legal, or doing it a partial role and coming back. And this is an opportunity you don't have at an external firm. You have other opportunities there, becoming the top-notch lawyer in life science, doing the big corporate transactions. That's all I'm sure very rewarding. In-house, you have other opportunities that could broaden you.
Okay. Yeah, well said. So, Amgen, it was an interesting time.
Amgen was amazing.
Yeah. What was the biggest surprise for you coming from an external job? I mean, I know you'd been seconded a couple of times, but there's always a little bit of a surprise. I mean, Switzerland too, bit different.
Yes, so we moved to Switzerland. That was a great move in terms of we felt very welcomed here. We had great support from colleagues within the legal team, giving us a little bit of a, I would say, welcome zone, telling us how things work in Switzerland. I would say, Maurice, the biggest surprise for me when joining Amgen was people sometimes think that when you go in-house, well, this is a 9-to-5 job, and the guys in the law firm, they work 24 hours plus the night. It was a very demanding job coming in. It is very time-consuming. You need to travel quite a bit. You need to connect with the clients that may sit across Europe or even beyond, and you need to build networks within Amgen to make sure you understand different drivers of why business decisions are made. That was not something that is intuitive to someone coming from the outside. From the outside, you are a technical expert and you provide technical advice, but the whole framework around that was something that I immediately realized I need to learn very quickly.
And when you were making that transition, was there anybody to kind of guide you in that, or did you seek out mentors? I mean, I think that's important for people who are in the first job, or how did you learn to navigate?
So my boss that hired me had that philosophy of most of the people that came to the Amgen legal department had a previous experience at a law firm. So those people were able, so himself, but also other people in the department were able to help me a little bit with that transition by saying, look, we certain things we are doing differently. These are things that maybe you can consider giving to an external colleague. These things you should maybe think about keeping it for yourself. So the transition was much simpler because the philosophy of that legal team was basically hiring people that have the external law firm perspective.
Okay.
Why? Because the technical savviness you learn in a law firm, in my viewpoint, the best, the ground foundation. The business aspect you learn best in a company.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, Amgen lawyers are kind of known in the industry to be, let's say, top notch or really, really tough to deal with, I guess. Anything that you can share from your time there that, I mean, obviously public information, I mean, any big victories or anything that
I would say you may know the saying that Amgen is a great law firm that happens to produce medicinal products.
Yeah, I've heard of it before.
At that point in time, it was very much true for the IP lawyers because there were a few patent litigations with big pharma companies that Amgen successfully succeeded in and making sure they can really bring their product to a market and are not blocked by competition. What can I share? I think one of the things that really strike me, and I'm still using that as a reference point, is the Amgen legal team was, in my view, not only highly skilled, but they were also super business-minded.
Okay.
And that was a philosophy that came with the leadership of the team. Really kind of not pushing you, but incentivizing you to embed yourself in the business, being part of certain cross-functional business groups where decisions on the launch of a product are made. I remember we did a few blockbuster launches, Xgeva with denosumab,
I remember that.
Repatha later on in cardiology. These were, on the IP side, difficult things, but also for us as commercial lawyers, very successful launches where we were able to help the business to bring the products into the market, helping on market access, helping on competition positioning, challenging or defending our positioning in terms of marketing, all these things.
Okay. And I mean, from the outside, I mean, we work in the industry, but I'm not privy to, the inner workings, let's say. It just seems like pharma companies and biotech companies just sue each other all day long. I mean, is that accurate?
It may be a perception, and yes, sure, they try to preserve their interest, and there is a little bit of that. I would say you need to distinguish the big patent litigation where it's really fundamental for the survival of the asset or even the company. And I think that's
what we see in the news. I mean,
that's what you see in the news. What you don't see in the news is like what I would say the nitty-gritty in terms of, okay, we are looking at a promotional claim of our competitor. We don't like it. We take legal actions. These are, I would say, day-to-day legal litigation or employment litigation, all these kind of things. I think the litigation part can be substantial to a company, potentially when it's a bigger one. But I would say the job of the legal department, it's much broader, right? We are trying to avoid litigation. We are building structures to make sure people can operate in a stratified risk approach, like taking risks consciously, knowing what the consequences could be, not only being the police saying no. So there is more. Litigation is for me the end game.
Yeah.
But there's much more upfront to make sure you either avoid it or you help the business to take a risk cautiously or intentionally.
Okay. And when it comes to regulation, and obviously we all need to, it's highly regulated as we've already alluded to. But, you got to learn how to skirt these things and go around them. And in many cases, like, for example, I don't know, companies are not required to disclose results of clinical trials, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they do them, well, they don't have to disclose that, but ultimately, if it runs well, they can. Do you think that that's detrimental to science if I do a trial and something goes not great, or I don't get a result that I wanted, but I don't disclose that? Any other company who's working on that has to go down that same road and duplicate the efforts. And I mean, I realize you got to protect your interests, and you've got trade secrets and everything like that. But do you think science as a whole gets held back as a result?
I understand that there is a little bit of a perception in the community that companies are holding back on clinical trial results. Maybe to slightly put a different perspective on this.
Yeah, please.
Companies that are stock listed,
yeah,
and you have a clinical trial that is material to you as a company for your overall business, you have to disclose those data points. So it's not even at our discretion to decide whether, using a provocative statement, whether we want to hide anything. So we have to disclose. I personally think there is less of a desire in the industry to not disclose than to disclose. Because honestly, even if you have invested a huge amount of money and the study failed, you need to explain that to your shareholders, to your investors. You need to have a rationale why you do the study, but then you also need to obviously say, why did it go wrong?
Yeah.
And that's why I understand there is this perception, and it may not be completely wrong, that companies are not always on the edge of transparency, let's put it that way. But if you look at the framework, there is a lot of framework that requires the companies, most notably disclosure obligations from a corporate standpoint, to actually make sure the results are published and are available for discussion in the R&D community.
Okay. And what do you think about the overall regulation? You know, there's current accusations that FDA, for example, moves too slowly and they want to speed it up, but that comes with another risk, obviously, to patients. Any thoughts on that, like current frameworks, how things are set up at the moment in Europe versus US?
Yeah. I mean, to me, we shall not forget that 5 years ago, speeding up in terms of approval when we look at the COVID situation was, to me, a shining moment for the industry and for the regulatory bodies. You may remember that the COVID vaccines that BioNTech and others developed were going through, in Europe, a rolling submission. So the submission was validated and assessed while data was generated to ensure that we have short timelines to bring the vaccine to the community so that patients can benefit from this. So this was, to me, the moment where you see the system is not stable. It is flexible and it can address these kind of very exceptional situations. I think overall, coming to the FDA in a moment, there is a lot of mechanisms that can help you to go for an accelerated approval. Also, the European EMEA has certain mechanisms there. Going to the FDA, I mean, there is also accelerated approval pathways, as you know, and they are used pretty regularly, particularly for innovative treatments that are addressing unmet medical needs. Very currently, or looking at the current situation, what we don't know is that what the new administration is doing in terms of headcount restructuring, looking at FDA overall, whether that would slow down timelines from a pure capacity perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
That's something to watch and look at it very carefully, which I'm sure we all do.
Yeah. Okay. Look, back to Amgen, the journey. So you had ultimately how many years? I don't know. 6
years at Amgen. Yes,
okay.
Until 2016.
Okay. So yeah, I was long gone at that point, but okay. And then what happened next?
So what happened next started already in Amgen. I worked with some clients in the business that eventually moved out of Amgen and going to smaller biotech companies. And the idea for them was to bring very good innovation that is generated in the US over to Europe, or even what's called international, so everything outside of the US, and build the commercial infrastructure to commercialize the products and bring them actually to patients. And one of my clients that I worked with at Amgen, you know that Zug is a very small town with one main street where everybody is kind of meeting at one restaurant. And one day I went to the restaurant and I met a guy who said, well, Marc, you know, I just joined this company called Tesaro as the head of international. And we are currently looking for the legal lead for the international business. And again, I didn't know anything about the company. It came like from the sideline. I said, look, let me think about this. And I was thinking, what are what is currently happening in Amgen. Could that be an opportunity? What are the pros and cons? And after a little bit of a discussion, I decided to join Tesaro in 2016, which I would say was one of the most influential moves that I did for my career.
Yeah. So let's stick on that for a minute, because I mean, when I hear the stories of Amgen and Lucerne in the 90s, and this was just like that basically was a startup, but really well-funded startup with lots of money. And then as, towards the mid 2010s, so 2016, when you were leaving, it was a very established business. They paid really well. I mean, there was so many plus points. Like, I mean, I worked in HR and I saw the comp and ben and how that worked, and nobody else paid healthcare. Nobody gave cars to managers. It was ridiculous, to be honest. And so a lot of people spoke about the golden handcuffs, right?
Golden cage, yeah.
Yeah. And how did you navigate the decision to say, okay, I'm earning tons of money. I'm in a super stable company. They've got an interesting pipeline. There's work to do. Mm-hmm. And now I can go into this company I remember it wasn't down on Darmstrasse. It was up on, where was it? What's the name?
It was on Darmstrasse in the Rigas in the beginning.
And then it moved. Yeah. Because I went down to visit a few people there once, and I remember thinking, yeah, look at this place. It's like a much smaller kind of room, not shabby offices or anything like that, but it wasn't like, a full corporate, and it was very kind of cobbled together. And when you see these things, and of course those companies will offer a great upside, like there's a stock plan. And I mean, it's like, again, if you think about joining Amgen in the 90s and getting a stock then, like versus today, a lot of people really hesitate with these decisions, because we approach on behalf of a lot of small companies, and we go to the big companies, and people are like, well, I don't know. Mm-hmm. What drove you to say, you said opportunity, you said something unknown, but ultimately, what was your thought process?
Pretty much what you just outlined was part of the thought process. Absolutely being transparent. Obviously, you think about, I'm in an established environment in which I have a good kind of package that I can live with. I have maybe an opportunity to grow. I have a good manager. So why the heck should I leave the company? I think if you leave the financial considerations aside for a moment, I'm coming back to that. You need to make for yourself a decision whether you say, do I like to evolve in an established business and help the business to grow, but it's already established, so you're operating in a framework that is set? Or do you like to take all this knowledge that you gained during the years at the law firm, at Amgen, wherever else, and you apply it to a white sheet of paper?
Yeah.
Because the small biotech, when it comes over to Europe, is a white sheet of paper, right? There is a business plan, but there's nothing else. There's no infrastructure, there's no legal structure, there's no compliance structure. And taking this white sheet of paper and being able to define it together with obviously the US business and functions there, that really excited me. So then I thought, that's cool. But then people in the family said, are you nuts? You have all this financial stability, you have a wonderful life, you have a good boss. Why is this white sheet of paper for you so interesting? And it came back to the point to say, yeah, it is, but if not now, when should I take the decision? At that point in time, I would say I still felt I was in the more early days of my career, and I thought, you also sometimes need to give it a try to see how it pans out. And I was nervous, I tell you. I was thinking, oh God, if this company is sold in 6 months, will I ever find a job again? Will I be seen as the stupid guy who left? Will I have burned my reputation? That all didn't realize, but that was part of the decision making. So
you would have joined before product approval as well, right?
Like I would have I would have joined before product approval.
So it could have failed. And then nobody has a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. I joined after the data readout because for the legal function, they didn't want to make the investment before data readout.
Yeah, okay.
But I came much before the approval was granted. Absolutely. Okay. So finally I said, it is super exciting to fill this white sheet of paper with all the experience I have and build a team and a structure around that. And that is how I decided in 2016 to join Tesaro and build, help to build the structure there.
Okay. And then how did that play out?
It played out extremely well because we had a wonderful 3-year gig. I have to say I had a wonderful boss, the GC in the US, who I'm still friend with, who helped me so much in saying, I know you have never done the build out, but here are a few considerations for you to consider. So he connected me to other people that have done this before. He gave me really a good start into this. Okay. We built a very successful biotech, which for many years was still the blueprint for other biotechs to build out ex-US. And in 2019, GSK came with the strategic imperative to rebuild oncology, and they acquired Tesaro. And look, there's some rewarding moments when the chief compliance officer or the GC of such a big company is coming and saying, you guys did quite a nice job to build out your legal infrastructure, and why can you do a policy on HCP engagement in 5 pages, whereas we need 30? That was a compliment that I took very personal, but also to the team, because it was a team effort, it wasn't me alone. So I felt very rewarded in 2019 when we got a lot of compliments how successful we were on the business side, but also on the infrastructure side, I would say.
So companies acquired, ultimately, I imagine then functions like yours are centralized, and you had a chance then to go on the journey. I mean, in Zug. Yeah. So did you bump into somebody in the street again?
Yeah. So you may remember that before I bumped into many people, but before I joined,
I got to go to Zug and start walking down the street.
You
bump
should
into
do that
people
more often.
I do it quite often, and you always meet somebody. You're always
exactly,
look,
exactly. And so what happened is, you may remember when I said, do I want to join Tesaro? I was like, oh my God, will I ever find a job again? But what is absolutely amazing is the network that is multiplying, because all these people that you worked with, they are going to other companies and they may have a need for a role like you did. And so that's exactly what happened. By coincidence, the head of Tesaro went on and built another company called Argenics, and I joined him again. And we did the build out again. And not only that we took the learnings from the Tesaro times, but we also thought, what did go well? What didn't go well? How can we do it slightly differently and still be successful? What is absolutely phenomenal, because we talked about the role being also embedded in the business, is in these small companies, you're not only a lawyer. You're a true business partner and part. I, at interim, took over the GM role for Germany in one of the companies.
I made a note about that. I didn't know you did that job. Yeah,
I did it. I tried not to destroy too many relationships with HCPs. I did it for a few months before we had someone to come in. But this is what small biotechs are all about. They look at you and say, hey, Maurice, we need someone who fills for 6 months the role until we have someone. What about you? Do you want to try it? And that is exciting.
Yeah.
You step out of your comfort zone and you gain experience.
Okay.
And so we did Argenics, and as you may have seen, also a few other biotechs afterwards.
Right. But so speaking about, let's say, stepping out of your comfort zone or what you normally do, and again, this goes back to the earlier conversation we had about, sticking in AI after doing a PhD in digital and AI, and then, well, all of a sudden, here's life science.
Yep.
Could do that. Now you're building this great legal career, and I think it was for you, it was Nectar next.
Yep.
And you didn't take a job in legal. I remember we spoke, and then you were like, no, I'm not doing a law job here. And I was like, oh, I mean, what? What are you doing?
So basically, one thing was always clear since I joined Hogan, I wanted to stay in life science. There was no way, even if someone came and said, I give you all the money in the world and you go to a bank and be a lawyer at the bank. I admire everybody who works there, but I'm so rooted in this. That's for me the red line, saying this is where I always want to be. I want to be in life science and doing a job there.
What about big pharma?
It could be big pharma.
Okay,
if the right
just interested. Okay,
I have no opposing views to big pharma because they operate differently and they are very successful. for me, what I really enjoyed is working in this small biotech, because when I started to work at Tesaro and Agios, my role was more than just legal already, not formally.
Fixing the photocopier.
So then when I joined Nectar, to your point, when we discussed, so in Nectar, we took a different approach. The company was saying, well, we still have some risk whether we will be able to commercialize. Should we hire a head of legal, a head of finance, a head of HR, or do we want to combine it into one role? And you build certain capabilities in your community then, so to say, and that's how I became the head of operations for Nectar outside of the US. So I combined the legal, HR, and finance role, which was amazing. I was responsible for the budget. I mean, normally lawyers can count to 2 or sometimes to 3. That was an amazing opportunity for me. And I had so much mentorship from the leader who believed in that setup and in myself, but also from the functional leads in the US who said, don't you worry, Marc, we will figure that out. It's no problem. We believe in this setup. And that's how I gained this experience beyond legal.
How did you do finance if you've never done finance?
Obviously, you have done finance by doing your budget, your forecasting, your latest estimates. But now I was in the lead. And basically what you do is also you obviously try to set up the structure, but then you build also expertise within your function. So I had a very strong FP&A lead who did the forecasting. And I had a very good accounting lead who did the accounting piece. So I was the connection to the US, making sure we implement the strategy. I was also driving the budget reviews, but I had people that helped on the technical expertise. And that's also what, for me, leadership is all about, to be transparent that you don't know everything.
Right.
And you need to have people that you empower.
When was your first leadership role?
It started in Amgen when I took over the responsibility for the what was called the mid-size markets. I was in the mid-size markets leadership team, representing legal there, and really creating kind of the leadership role for the legal function. There, representing legal there, being the strategic thought partner for that regional GM. And then in Tesaro, it was the international leadership team, and then on and on.
You had a few more biotechs in between, always US biotechs coming to Europe, but not now.
No, not now.
So what about it? What is Argenics? What do they do? Where are they from?
So Argenics is a company, it's a Belgium, registered also in the Netherlands, but European biotech company. That is rooted in science with respect to rare diseases. Okay. The company is a very interesting company because it's one of the few biotech companies that were actually built out of Europe and made it to a successful commercial company. So they survived the R&D life cycle, so to say.
Okay. What's it like working in European biotech versus a US biotech? Is there any differences?
Yes, to a degree. I would say the difference is potentially that there is, despite the fact that you need to have a good business case, there is a stronger belief that the European markets are markets that are worth commercializing and exploring. You may know that a lot of US biotechs, before they decide to come to Europe, they think like, oh, this is more of a distraction than anything else. I may give it to a big pharma, or I don't even focus on that for now. I focus on the US market, creating value and then selling. Argenics seems, and I only joined a year ago, seem to have always had a stronger belief in the markets outside of the US. If you look at the sales right now, obviously, a huge contribution comes from the US. Yes. So this is why the company, despite being a European company, is still very heavily influenced by the US because it's the biggest revenue driver. Yeah. But there was a strong belief always doing the European and even like Japan and other markets by ourselves. And that's a big difference because there's therefore a stronger foundation to build also the infrastructure in those markets and enable the countries to be fully commercially ready.
Okay. And how is your team set up now? I mean, how many people are you leading? And I want to get into a little bit around your philosophies, because I think that that's important. We've seen your career journey, how you develop, you made these certain decisions. But oftentimes being wonderful at your job doesn't necessarily make you a great manager.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, we've seen multiple occasions of this in both our business and with our clients, where we brought somebody great in and they said after a year or two, let's promote that person and put them in charge of a team. And then it all falls to pieces. How did you make that transition, especially coming into Argenics, which was sort of an established business, not big, but like it was not in startup phase anymore. No. And how did you come in? How did you take over that team? And how do you lead them today?
I mean, look, first of all, as you referred to, before I joined Argenics, I had a kind of more commercially driven role. So the first decision to join Amgen, Argenics at this point in time now was, do I want to go back into a functional role, a legal role?
Yeah.
And what really, and I'm now doing the segue to the team and philosophy, the one thing that really attracted me is, can I use all this experience that I gained in finance, in HR? Not that I'm an expert in all of this, being a GM, by far not being an expert, but using that to create a strong business function, a business partner function. Instead of everybody who is hired in that team that I'm currently leading is an excellent lawyer. How do we evolve ourselves to become a true business partner function and not just
advisory?
Naming it
Yeah. Okay.
We did that already, to your point around leadership evolution. I was leading the team at Tesaro and building it from scratch. And we were eventually I think we were 7 people supporting legal and compliance. And I had moments where people came back to me and said, I don't really understand how you are leading this here. And with some things, I'm not really happy. And that was also a moment for me of self-reflection, because I had a vision and I drove that vision to go and look for coaching, look for external, not help, but guidance and counsel, how to evolve yourself to become really a leader that is not just leading, but is also bringing the team along and giving opportunities to the team. And it's a journey. And it's sometimes a painful journey, because you need to reflect on yourself quite a bit. But to me, it was, in hindsight, the best thing that could happen to me, that these things happen, because you evolve and you develop.
Okay.
So coming to Argenics, so I had a few interviews, I had to do a workshop, and it became very clear to me that my boss is very much in the same spirit of business partnership. She is a very team spirit driven person. And the one thing that really attracted is my predecessor went out to become a GM. So I'm coming back from a business perspective. So I saw this philosophy that I had in me already applied there.
Okay. Yeah.
So I thought, wow, there's a few things coming together, a super nice team. It seems philosophy-wise, the team may work with me. And that's how I joined why I joined last April. We are, for that region, right now a very small team of 4 people, supporting Australia, Middle East, Europe, and obviously the European markets. People are culturally very diverse. Some people are sitting in Ghent, where we have the corporate headquarters. We have a person sitting in Zurich, a person sitting in Germany, me also sitting in Zurich. So from different backgrounds. And the first thing was to see how we can actually bring this together as one team, because we are a virtual team. We are not physically together.
Right.
But then also understand how do people approach their respective clients in terms of the business partnership. And you see different approaches, and bring that all together and workshop what does best work in the Argenics way. Because you may have a vision, but it needs to align also with the vision of the company, right? How we collaborate. And that's what we are currently doing. We are pretty intensively looking into, together with our US colleagues and our colleague in Japan, how can we evolve our support model? The company's growing, we get new people, but preserving what we call the Argenics way, which is strong collaboration with the business. It sounds obvious, but really living, embedding yourself in the business, being not only at the table when requested, but proactively there. How can we do that, given that we are a limited amount of people, we have limited amount of time, and a universe of things that we could do.
Right.
And this is where we are right now, which is super exciting and super interesting.
Before we wrap up, Marc, what we like to do is a segment called the Mentorship Minute.
Yep.
Now, we've talked about a lot of things today, all these decisions that you had, struggles that you faced, inflection points in your career, which were not necessarily things that you expected to happen.
No.
What advice would you give for people with respect to their leadership, decision-making, career? I mean, speaking to your younger self is usually the way that we hear this question, but dive right in. Tell us what you can.
I would say be open for opportunities, even if you don't see the opportunity at a first glance. Take your time and look at things if they come up. But even more importantly, own your career. I think what I've seen over time with myself and others is people are looking for others to shape their career. But within an environment where you work, may it be an outside counsel, may it be you're working in an in-house department, there is opportunities. You need to grab them. You need to identify for yourself, what do I like to do? And how could I achieve that in a company? In Argenics, we have something that is called the Personal Development Plan. And it's a plan where you say, this is what I want to achieve in the next 3-5 years on a soft skill side, on a technical side. And the company is then looking, where can we open these opportunities? Like my predecessor, he wanted to become a GM.
Okay.
So there was So own your career. Own your career. It's not anybody else is doing that for you. It's only yourself, and learn from your mistakes and embrace them.
Okay.
Don't just put them in the cupboard.
Yeah. How do you go about that, though? I mean, when you say, okay, Argenics has a PDP for people there, so that's kind of a framework that I can exist in. But if you don't have that there, I mean, how do you, first of all, opportunities come, but you can also create them, right?
Yeah.
How have you, or how would you advise people to create those opportunities in a career development sense? Because if you own it, right, there's, how would you say that you can create those opportunities?
In my viewpoint, most of the companies that I've worked with, they always have room to grow in terms of skill sets, infrastructure, or maybe even further optimizing the connection between the support functions and the business. So if you identify opportunities by saying, for example, I would love to support this country in being embedded in the local leadership team because it will help me to understand the local market access. I may be able to contribute to that. These are active things that you can shape.
So it's proactivity.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And not only putting that on paper in a PDP, but then also going to your manager or whoever is the right person and saying, how can we make this happen? And people may say, well, wait, we need to potentially think about X, Y, that, and then we can help you, enable you to go and support Italy and the leadership team. I'm just giving you this as an example. The other thing is, if a company has a framework, just don't take it as, it's a framework. I'm writing something down and I'm done.
Right, okay, yeah.
Live it. And it sounds stupid and obvious, but live it. I see so many people that what I'm doing quite regularly, I'm doing a touch-in with the people by saying, how do you feel? Do you think things are moving the way you want them? And they're like, oh, I didn't revisit it since we put it on paper. And it gives them a reminder, also saying, you own this. I don't own this as a manager, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also owning my PDP. I'm not asking the GC to do my personal development plan. This to me is the most, it sounds simple, but it's potentially the most important thing in my experience.
As always, it's the obvious things you've heard your whole life, as in own it. But these are the things, once you live them,
yes,
you really understand what they mean. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. Marc, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and I look forward to seeing more of you in the future.
Thank you, Maurice, for having me. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Lab, where we dissect life science success stories. If you enjoyed that, please check us out and follow on Spotify under Leadership Lab. If you don't want to miss any episodes, be sure to follow Headcount on LinkedIn or subscribe to the Headcount YouTube channel. And as always, we thank Headcount for making this possible. If you don't want to miss out on any of the latest job opportunities in the life sciences industry, please check out the newest roles at headcount.ch.